Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you have done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court, and as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. And I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. We have worked together for years in a bipartisan way to advance U.S. interests and fund those programs. So with respect to my colleagues, how long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Are we going to roll over as Trump tramples our laws and undermines our U.S. leadership, burns down what we have spent decades building, and let millions of people across our globe suffer and die? Or are we going to stand up, push back, assert our constitutional power of the purse? And to my colleagues on both sides, this is the moment to decide whether this committee continues to be a powerful bipartisan force a force that I think we've all been proud of for a very long time, a force that is focused on safety and economic strength and national security, focused on leading the world in research and development and countering China and others with our soft power and our military power. Every single member of this committee knows what we are risking by letting this administration tear down so much. On USAID and other programs, we can always talk about how we can make things work better and other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would
false.
just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
Well, what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that point.
Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them.
No.
But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and impoundment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled, and I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out, so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information when you put together a budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to get right into it. Secretary Rubio, I'm going to embrace my Jewish mother instincts for a moment. So as a mother, a senator, and a fellow human being, I can tell you that I'm not even mad anymore about your complicity in this administration's destruction of U.S. global leadership. I'm simply disappointed. And I wonder if you're proud of yourself in this moment when you go home to your family, because I've always found you, Senator Rubio, to be a bipartisan, pragmatic partner, a true believer that the U.S. is stronger when we lead with diplomacy and development. You have a strong record on this, but I don't recognize Secretary Rubio. A stalwart support of Israel, you've watched this administration abandon Saudi normalization with Israel in order to pursue business deals. You were once a fierce critic of Vladimir Putin, but you sat idly by as the president berated the elected leader of Ukraine for not capitulating to Russia. And worst of all, you've kneecapped foreign assistance, including programs that you previously championed and made America less safe, less strong, less prosperous in doing so. I know you know this in your heart, and I can't make this point any better than you did yourself in 2019 when you said, Anybody who tells you that we can slash foreign aid and that will bring us to balance is lying to you. So with that, I'm just going to move on to my questions. Thank you. And I'm going to talk about international women's issues because during your time as senator, you were a champion of international women's issues. You helped introduce bills that would have codified the Department's Office of Global Women's Issues and Women's Global Development Prosperity Initiative. You supported several bills, including Senator Shaheen's Bipartisan Women, Peace, and Security Act. During your confirmation hearing, you committed to me that you would support women's economic empowerment abroad. And at this year's International Women of Courage Award, you waxed poetically about the administration's support for women abroad. So help me understand how to square your past with your present. You're proposing the full elimination of the Office of Global Women's Issues. You've terminated hundreds of programs that help women and girls. You provided no guidance to the department on whether they should continue to implement the Women, Peace, and Security Act, and I'm still waiting to see your support for women's economic empowerment overseas. How can you dismiss the concerns of women around the world? Do you believe that the data shows that women's economic participation includes greater economic development worldwide and that women's participation in peace negotiations guarantees longer outcomes? And I have a few questions, so I would respectfully ask for a yes or no. Don't you think that women's participation is important and allows for better outcomes?
This is not a game show. I'm not going to ask that with a yes or no. That's an important question. And I can answer it. We're not abandoning women's issues.
So do you believe the Office of Global Women's Issues should be eliminated?
One thing is to eliminate an office. Another thing is to eliminate the function. The function will still exist. It'll be driven at the regional bureaus. So every one of our regions will have someone who's looking at and driving that issue, and right down to the embassy. It remains a priority. The same with the law that you outlined that I supported. This is going to be executed on, but it's going to be executed at the regional level and at the embassy level. And the reason why is because the challenges facing women in Africa are different than the challenges facing women in Central America,
and
which
I
are
have
different
your commitment that you're going to support women around the world, because without the women being able to be successful in their countries, I believe we can't have peace, stability, and our countries move forward.
Sure, and it remains part of our agenda. It's just going to be, the service is still going to be delivered, but it's going to be delivered at the regional and embassy level, not through a standalone office in Washington, D.C.
When will we see the reports on this and how this will be delivered?
Well, this is what we're engaged in with this committee now, which is our reorganization process. We've made an initial presentation to the committees. It's not final. We've received input through the comment period, including from our own building, but also from members of Congress on both sides, and meaning the House and Senate. Now we'll come back to you based on all of that input on what we propose to be the final reorganization.
Do you have a timeline when you'll come back? Because I don't want to see women left behind around the world, and I think you'd agree with me. But I'm going to turn on to Israel. If you can give us a timeline of when you're proposing to do this, that would be helpful, and we maybe come back and revisit it, Mr. Chairman. If you have a timeline of when.
Sure, we're engaged now. I think we'll owe you a congressional notification here within the next few weeks, which is but all of that is being built on the comment period in which we've taken input from staff and members of this committee as well as in the House.
Thank you. Can I move on to Israel for a second? So the Office of Security Coordinator in Israel, the OSC, was established by President Bush in 2005. The OSC is widely respected, including by the IDF Central Command, for facilitating security coordination between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli security forces, which has been crucial in preventing terrorist attacks against Israelis. However, it's reported that you plan, again, to eliminate OSC, which I believe, and many others, could lead to further destabilization in the West Bank and threaten Israel's security. So, Mr. Secretary, should the U.S. continue playing a role in facilitating successful security coordination between IDF and Palestinian security forces to safeguard Israeli lives? And if so, do you believe the State Department should continue to maintain the OSC and support it financially?
Yeah, there's news reports every day about things that aren't true. So the only thing that's been discussed about OSC is whether it should be brought under the authority of the ambassador and the embassy.
You're not proposing eliminating. Thank you. We'll move further on this discussion. With my minute left, I'm going to talk about vaccines abroad because Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, we are so proud, has prevented nearly 19 million children's deaths since it was created by providing vaccines to 50 countries. Diseases, they don't know borders. So a small investment from the U.S. can save American lives by stopping outbreaks really before they reach our shores. You were previously a champion of global vaccines, twice leading resolutions in support of continued U.S. investments in these programs. So, Mr. Secretary, again, do you consider vaccines, including for malaria, Ebola, to be life-saving? Given Gavi's proven track record of saving lives, preventing global disease outbreaks that could reach our borders, will you commit to prioritizing continued U.S. support for Gavi?
But we haven't canceled U.S. support for malaria or any of these other communicable diseases and/or vaccines. What we have, there are some individual programs that may have been canceled because they weren't being delivered in the appropriate way. All of these functions will continue. The difference now is the function will be happening under the Department of State, as opposed to a set-alone entity, which you had very little oversight over, by the way, in this committee, even though we tried in the years that I was on it with USAID. And I don't want to, I may respond to one point you made just because I'm curious. We have not abandoned Saudi normalization with Israel, as you pointed. The Saudis are the ones that have expressed their inability to move forward on it so long as the conflict is happening in Gaza. But we would love to see normalization.
You know, when it comes to the Saudis and normalization, and we can have this I'd be so happy to have you in my office or come to your office and talk about this. It was quite apparent on the last trip that the president was more interested in making business deals and trying to move forward peace in the region. It's not just about the business deal. There's a lot going on, and there is pressure to bear. But we did receive a list, I just want to say for the record, that showed Gavi was terminated. And so if you could send us something to show that it's turned back on, we'd be glad to see that. I know I'm over my time.
Senator Ska.